7 terrifying historical figures. Today, we are going over the creepiest historical figures. Welcome to Brave Channel. You won't want to miss number 1, so make sure you stay till the end. Kindly subscribe to the channel and click on the bell button. Number 7. Vlad III Dracula, better known by the gruesome moniker Vlad the Impaler, was a 15th century ruler of Wallachia, now part of Romania, who became notorious for his rampant use of torture, mutilation, and mass murder. Vlad's military exploits saw him praised by many as a hero, but his unmatched cruelty and penchant for barbaric executions, often against his own people, contributed to his reputation as one of history's most cold-blooded leaders. Vlad's victims were supposedly killed through unspeakable means, including disembowelment, beheading, and even being skinned or boiled alive. Still, his preferred method was impalement, a grisly process in which the victim had a wooden stake slowly driven through their body before being left to die of exposure. After one famous military victory against the advancing Ottoman Turks, Vlad supposedly had around 20,000 men impaled on the banks of the Danube. When the second wave of invaders arrived, they were said to have immediately retreated upon seeing the grotesque forest of corpses. According to some accounts, Vlad enjoyed dining among the thousands of impaled bodies and would even dip his bread into the blood of his victims. This bizarre practice, along with the name Dracula and Vlad's birthplace of Transylvania, would later partly inspire the vampire in Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, Dracula. Number 6. Rasputin. Much of Grigory Rasputin's life is shrouded in myth, but history paints the picture of a mad monk who steered Russia towards chaos. Rasputin began his career as a populist holy man and was known to preach a religious doctrine arguing that true salvation was only possible through the indulgence in sin. His reputation as a faith healer eventually saw him summoned to the court of Tsar Nicholas II, where he ingratiated himself to Tsarina Alexander Fyodorovna after helping her hemophiliac son recover from an injury. By 1911, Rasputin has secured himself a place as the Tsarina's closest advisor. He then began using his influence to appoint incompetent and crooked officials, while also indulging in drink and perverse sexual appetites. Rasputin had a con man's charm and reportedly took delight in humiliating high society women by making them lick his dirty fingers after he had dipped them in his soup. He was accused of raping a nun and was known to consort with prostitutes by night, even as he advised the Tsarina on state policy by day. Fearing that the wild-eyed sorcerer was leading Russia towards disaster, in 1916, a group of aristocratic conspirators poisoned him with cyanide. When the toxin failed to have its desired effect, the men reportedly shot him several times and then beat him before dumping his body into the freezing Neva River. Rasputin's death ultimately came too late to save the royal family from public disgrace. The Tsar, the Tsarina, and their 5 children were all murdered in 1918 during the Bolshevik Revolution. Number 5. H Holmes. Born Herman W. Mudgett, the notorious serial killer H Holmes spent his early career as an insurance scammer before moving to Illinois in advance of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. It was there that Holmes built what he referred to as his castle, a 3-story inn that secretly turned into a macabre torture chamber. Some rooms were equipped with hidden peepholes, gas lines, trapdoors, and soundproofed padding, while others featured secret passages, ladders, and hallways that led to dead ends. There was also a greased chute that led to the basement, where Holmes had installed a surgical table, a furnace, and even a medieval rack. Both before and during the World's Fair, Holmes led many victims, mostly young women, to his lair, only to asphyxiate them with poison gas and take them to his basement for horrific experiments. He then either disposed of their bodies in his furnace or skinned them and sold their skeletons to medical schools. Holmes was eventually convicted of the murders of 4 people, but he confessed to at least 27 more killings before being hanged in 1896. Holmes' horror castle was later turned into a grotesque museum, but the building burned down before it could be opened. Number 4. Elizabeth Bathory. Often called the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman who is widely considered to be history's most deranged female serial killer. Throughout the late 16th and early 17th century, Bathory reportedly lured young peasants to her castle with promises of high-paying jobs as servants. Once trapped in the citadel, these victims were subject to unspeakable tortures. Some were beaten or stabbed with needles, while others were stripped naked and left to freeze in the snow. According to legend, Bathory even bathed in the blood of her virgin victims, believing it would keep her skin radiant and youthful. Bathory allegedly massacred as many as 80 peasant girls, though the number may be as high as 600, but it was only when she turned her attention to young noblewomen that she was finally stopped. In 1611, she was bricked up inside her castle's chamber with only a small opening for food. She would die 4 years later in 1614. Some historians have since argued that Bathory was framed by political enemies. While this claim is disputed, there is little doubt that her reputation has become thoroughly intertwined with myth and legend. Along with Vlad the Impaler, she is said to be one of the historical influences behind Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula. Number 3. Jack the Ripper. In 1888, London's Whitechapel district was gripped with reports of a vicious serial killer stalking the city streets. The unidentified madman was known to lure prostitutes into darkened squares and side streets before slitting their throats and sadistically mutilating their bodies with a carving knife. Between August and November, 5 streetwalkers were found butchered in the downtrodden East End district, sparking a media frenzy and citywide manhunt. While he was originally known simply as the Whitechapel Murderer, the killer soon earned a chilling new moniker, Jack the Ripper. Without modern forensic techniques, Victorian police were at a loss in investigating the Ripper's heinous crimes. Eyewitness testimonies were often contradictory, and after taking his final victim on November 9th, the killer seemed to disappear like a ghost. The case was finally closed in 1892, but Jack the Ripper has remained an enduring source of fascination. The most popular theories suggest that the killer's understanding of anatomy and vivisection means that he was possibly a butcher or a surgeon. Over 100 possible suspects have been proposed, and the term ripperology has even been coined to describe the extensive study the case receives. Number 2. Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Rais was a 15th century French nobleman, soldier, and companion in arms of Joan of Arc during the Hundred Years' War. Rais's military career has earned him many plaudits, but his distinguished reputation and opulent lifestyle hid a horrific dark side that included charges of Satanism, rape, and murder. Beginning in 1430, Rais reportedly began torturing and brutally killing young children, many of them peasant boys who had come to his castle to work as pages. After sexually molesting these servants, Rais would murder them by cutting their throats or breaking their necks with clubs. Others were decapitated and dismembered, and Rais was even known to kiss the severed heads of some of his victims. Rais indulged in these sadistic habits unchecked until 1440, when he attacked a priest over a land dispute. This drew the ire of the church, which landed an investigation and soon uncovered the baron's history of depravity. A famous trial ensued in which Rais was charged with murder and sodomy and accused of practicing alchemy and other satanic rites. He eventually confessed under torture to having murdered as many as 140 children, though some have claimed the number may be much higher, and was hanged to death and then burned in October 1440. Some historians have since suggested that Rais was the influence for the 17th century folktale, Bluebeard, which follows a wealthy baron who murders his young wives. Number 1. Tomás de Tortamida. From 1483 to 1498, Tomás de Tortamida presided over the Spanish Inquisition, the notorious Catholic tribunal used to try heretics and non-believers. In order to force their confessions, these victims were subject to gruesome punishments, including strangulation or being stretched on the rack. Others were waterboarded or put through strappado, a grueling torture in which subjects were hanged by their wrists until their arms dislocated. A Franciscan monk, Tortamida was the man responsible for reorganizing the Inquisition and expanding its scope to include crimes like blasphemy, usury, and even sorcery. Tortamida also ordered the expulsion of thousands of Jews, Muslims, and blacks, all of whom he believed would taint the spiritual purity of Spain. Those that converted to Christianity were allowed to remain, but risked being tortured or executed if they tried to practice their faith in secret. All told, some 2,000 people were murdered during Tortamida's reign as Grand Inquisitor, most of them beheaded or burned at the stake. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the like button, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future amazing videos.